All right. Hello and good afternoon. I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in today. We have a rather interesting topic to bring up, and I think that you all want to hear about. I'm your host, Garrett Corwin, and I'll be here with a few panelists to get a better understanding of how the future of technology will be used at a more personal level. To be specific, we will be discussing the possibility of how gene editing technology can allow humans to make changes to their bodies and whether it's morally, socially, and economically acceptable today. So, first off, let's introduce the panelists.
I'm Elijah Hansen, and I'll be talking about the social and psychological aspects of genome editing.
I'm Andrew Pape. I will be talking about the costs of genome editing.
I'm Kyle Altendorf, and I'll be talking about the political effects of genome editing.
And I'm Garrett Corwin, and I'm going to be talking about the legal and ethical debate of genome editing. So, gentlemen, let's just dive into this topic. If this technology can edit our DNA and is available today, would we want to use it in order to change our bodies in hopes to prevent disease, cure birth defects, or even make our children have more desirable body traits? Eli, I'd like to start off with you first and get a view on how you think this would be handled socially today.
Yeah, starting off for the social side of it, it's just such a new technology where you don't know if it's going to actually help throughout like the lifespan of the child, or whether it's safe enough. So whether you're talking to friends or family, they might have different viewpoints on whether it should be done or not, if it's actually good for the kid, or whether it will actually save them from getting other diseases and stuff in the future. And for psychological side, over the last years, there's been genes that have been found to be paired with psychiatric disorders and have been identified. And according to Burmeister, although some psychiatric conditions have important hereditary components, there's no genetic disorders, and therefore it's unrealistic to go in and change out the disease gene and throw in a new healthy one. It's not to that point yet. It still has a lot of growth, but if they could go in and do that, that would be great and help out a lot of people with diseases or psychological disorders, and be better for the future.
Yeah, for sure. I think, like you were saying, the technology just is really new right now, and people are still really kind of weary about, being the test subject, I guess, or whatever. I think there is a really negative prejudice about it, especially from uh, maybe a more religious population. They would see it as, unethical, or, like this kid could, just because he has a disease or a disability, he could, go on to strengthen himself and strengthen his character and personality traits in other ways that, someone without a disability wouldn't have to do, because they don't have to go through that kind of hardship. Or so I think, like you were saying, it's just so new, and before results start getting posted and people see outcomes, I think the negative prejudice around it is kind of going to stick around for a little while.
And since this is so new, it's going to need a lot of funding, and we're not really sure where the money is going to come from. But Andrew, did you have anything to say about like funding for this new technology?
Yeah, so I've read stuff from articles posted from the UK, and they've been over there. They've been doing some therapies and clinical trials to restore eyesight in some people who were born without it. But this treatment has been reported to cost close to $450,000 per eye. So I mean, $1 million brand new set of eyes. And even other places I was reading, there is a new or again clinical trial drug called nusinerine that is being used to try and treat spinal atrophy when infants don't have. It's a disease that deteriorates the spinal muscles of infants who often don't live to see their second birthday. Those treatments have been reported to cost 750 for the first year, 750,000 that would be, and then each subsequent year when you go in for a checkup or whatever they refer to it as, it's $350 each year after that. So those costs definitely add up very quickly for such a new kind of thing. And there's people even questioning like, if this affects such a small number of people and the costs of it are so high, will there even be anyone in that group who can afford it? So is it worth it to put the time and manpower and all of that stuff into developing this when it may not even be used because it's not realistic to be used?
Yeah, and so you're saying that like since it's such an expensive form of like technology, only the really rich of the rich are going to be able to afford this, and obviously that's going to be an issue skewing the population and possibly just making the rich more elite with the better traits and like no health defects and things like that. That could really be an issue since not everyone can afford this kind of treatment. So going off that, maybe the government might have to get involved. Well, it will definitely be involved in the decisions with this technology. So Kyle, if you could talk about maybe like the political side of this topic.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of people would definitely want to use technology to better themselves, and there's no other technological country like the United States. But I think there's also considerable wariness when it comes to gene editing. And like Andrew said, your highly religious groups are probably more than likely going to be against something like this. But according to the Pew Research Center, Americans do have mixed emotional reactions for gene editing, whereas 2/3 of U.S. adults say that the prospect of being able to edit a child's genes makes them very or somewhat worried. And then half of the country, U.S. adults, said that they are somewhat enthusiastic or very enthusiastic to learn about more about it. I mean, and that's also not a complete product yet. But the survey also asked respondents if giving a healthy babies a gene that could avoid serious diseases or conditions is, again, going against meddling with nature, or if it is a line that we shouldn't cross. And Americans are split on this, and 51% of people said that this is no different than any other way we try to improve our lives, and 46% of people said this goes against crossing a moral line of messing with the way that things are. So I think that this debate will not only be a national issue, it'll be a internet or global, worldwide thing, and we will see which countries decide to do this and which don't.
Yeah, going off that too, you also have to. You'll see whether it's morally right and wrong, where people agree and not to, and also with that, it goes by if it'll be legal or not, state by state or with federally. And I feel like there'll always be a vary on opinions whether it's right or not, especially with religious aspects in there and how it's going to help change or affect the future.
Yeah, that's a good transition to talk about like the legal aspect of it. So in my research, according to the NIH in 2014, like there were about 40 countries that discouraged or banned the research of genome editing, including 15 nations in Western Europe because of ethical and safety concerns. There's also international effort led by the U.S., the U.K., and China to harmonize the regulation of this application of this technology. I think which is really good to consider the danger that it may bring. Um, some countries actually have already allowed the use of genome editing research on non-viable embryos, which are basically embryos that aren't going to result in a human birth. But then, considering that, there's also other countries that have implemented gene editing research in actual viable embryos, which kind of gets into that ethical debate there with humans that could be edited that may end up dying from what is going into their bodies. Um, and at least in the U.S., no federal funds can be used to conduct any of this research for destroying or creating human embryos. Um, so they're all going to have to use private funding from companies, at least in the U.S., to do this research. Um, so yeah, on the ethical side of things, until there's enough safe research that we can do, which is restricted because you can't really do it on humans. You have to do it with animals or something like that. Until there's enough research, um, it's really going to be hard to make progress with this technology. Um, and some people worry about like consent issues. Uh, some people say that you can't give consent for an embryo because it's not in any stage of life where it can have the knowledge of what's going on. But also people will make the counter argument that the parents are in charge of creating that child and raising that child, and they can give consent to do whatever they deem is correct for their family. So there's that both kind of sides to the consent issue. So any kind of final thoughts on that topic?
I think that it would be good if more countries were working together on this, as then they can advance further and gain knowledge on the topic more rapidly, because there is such little information out right now about it. But I do think that it might be dangerous if all these countries then too are uniformly going to regulate how this is regulated throughout. Basically, they will decide whether it is ethical or morally right. But I think it would be better, though, if more countries worked on it together.
Yeah. All right, so I think we've had a really good discussion here. We hope that you guys can take away some ideas on how the new forms of this technology can affect your life, and maybe the implementation of this in the future could be a good thing or a bad thing, and that the use of this may not be socially or morally acceptable. So we hope that you can join us next time. This is your host signing off. Have a great day.